Hey folks, welcome back. So this week we are going to start putting in the water lines, and that is all we're going to be working on for this part of the water system that we're putting in. We're just going to be putting in lines and getting it all connected together, and then in the next video I think we'll be starting on the pads that the water is sit on. But this week we're just going to work on digging a whole bunch of trench and laying a whole bunch of line. I think it's around 6,500 feet, something like that. So I think we've got our work cut out for ourselves on this. So enough talking, let's get to trenching. So we're starting out in the what we call the spring field here. And this is the hay field that is directly in front of the mill house. And for this part, we're using the trencher on the skid steer. And it worked really well for this part because it was nice, easy digging. There wasn't a whole lot of rock in it, and it was an excellent area to use the trencher with. However, we were having some issues with the trencher because it wasn't holding tension in the chain. And so if we started getting on too much of a slope side to side, or we started hitting rocky stuff, the chain started jumping. So as you saw, kind of as I got right about halfway across the field there was a little bit of a ditch that I had to go across, and that was the first time that it threw the chain, and I hadn't had to mess with that before. By the time that we got all the trench dug, I could get that chain back on and be back in the skid steer in about 30 seconds. This time it took me about 30 minutes, but you know, had to get it all figured out, and then it stayed on pretty well the rest of the way across this field. Now we're jumping ahead a day or two here, and we've actually already laid out the water line beside the trench. I forgot to film rolling that out, but I will show later on in the video how we did that. But for this time I forgot, but you can kind of see it to the left of the trench there. You can kind of see a little bit of a line running up through there. Now at this point we've already started heading up the hill up towards the cemetery, and now what you're seeing from inside the skid steer as it's pouring down rain, and we have not gotten rain now in almost a month out here, so it's really dry out here now. But while we were trying to do the trenching, we were getting some rain, but that doesn't slow the trencher down at all. And it was quite nice to be inside the enclosed cab as it was pouring down, and I was able to continue on working through there. So now we're jumping over to just south of the well, which is coming up the mountain from where the well's at, heading up towards the cistern. And this is sort of the main line that goes up through there. And this was kind of rocky. It had a bunch of roots coming in from trees around there. So this just ended up being an excavator trench that we had to put in there. And it's a lot slower with the excavator, but when you're running into the rocks and roots and stuff like that, especially since we were having tension issues with the skid steer trencher, this was just, it was the way to go. Now, as promised, this is how we did the majority of rolling out the water line. And what I did is I threw the stock panels on the truck, and then I ran a just scrap piece of wood through the stock panel, and then that piece of wood went through the center of the reel. And I stood on the back and kind of made sure that the line was feeding off all right. My dad drove the truck ahead, and it worked pretty well. We did probably 4,000 feet of it this way, maybe closer to 5,000, and it worked pretty well. A couple times it kind of got bound up and got a little bit of kink in there that we had to cut out and then put in an insert and connect the line back together to get rid of that kinked part of it. But other than a couple spots like that, this worked surprisingly well. Now, it would have been way better to have an actual reel to roll it off from, and I would have liked to have built something like that before we got started on the project, but it didn't happen, and this worked all right. So now we're back down to the Springfield, and we got the line into the trench kind of when the last time we were down here. And at this point, I'm filling this back in, and this was one of the really nice things about the trench that was done with the skid steer trencher, because since it was such a small trench and there was so little dirt, what I was able to do is I was able to take the back blade for the tractor and get that offset, and then I could do a 3-pass run on it to get all the dirt back into the trench. And I timed myself at one point, and I did, oh gosh, how much was it, like 800 or 1,000 feet of line in about 20 minutes with this method, getting it filled back in. Now, anything that was done with the excavator, that we had to basically use the excavator to push the dirt back in, because it's got that blade on the front of it that you can drop down and push in with that. So it was way, way slower filling in the excavator trench. So it was slower digging with the excavator and slower filling the trench back in that the excavator dug. But for here on the Springfield, it was just super fast getting that filled back in, and less disturbed ground, and it was better all around with the smaller trench where it was possible. Now once we got up here by the cemetery, the ground got kind of rough, and it was a little bit too bad for my truck, 2-wheel drive truck, to get through there, so we kind of rigged something up behind the tractor to help reel that out. It didn't work nearly as well as with the truck, but it was better than manually rolling the 500-foot roll of waterline out through there, so it was better than that, but not as good as the truck. Now here we are back over onto kind of the main line coming up from the well, and we're just doing a little bit of cleanup around in here, getting the bottom of the trench leveled out, smoothed out, so that we can put the line in through there. As I was working, I realized I really needed to get onto the other side of the trench in order to really get it cleaned out well and do minimal shovel work, which is, that's always the idea. Do as little as possible with, the hand tools, do as much as you can with the excavator. So I very, very carefully crossed the trench here with the excavator. First time doing that, but it went all right. Didn't end up down in the ditch, so I guess all's well that ends well. And now we're back up near the cemetery again, doing some filling in of excavator trench. And you'll notice that I'm first going in with the excavator bucket and dumping a little bit of dirt in on top of the line. That way I can make sure I'm not getting any rocks directly on the line here. And the reason for that is, as pumps kick on and off and valves open, it can cause that line to kind of move a little bit underground. So if you have a rock sitting directly on top of your pipe, it can actually cause that rock to very, very slowly start wearing into the wall of the pipe, which of course will create a leak after you have enough time and enough of those little pulses over top of the pipe wall. Now in this area, it wasn't too bad as far as the amount of rock, but in areas where there was a lot of rock or rock that was really sharp and jagged, which we definitely did run into further up the main line there, what we ended up having to do is sleeve it with like it's just a drain pipe, corrugated drain pipe, and that way it protects the pipe. Any rocks that are on top, it's not going to be rubbing on it. And we actually put in at least probably 2,000 feet of the sleeving on various parts of the pipe to help protect it from rocks. Now this is doing some trenching up near where some of the other water line comes down through, which was done with the guy when he put in the main cistern up in the MVP right of way. So that's why there's a little bit of a break here, because I'm trying to avoid running over that pipe and tearing that up. So we had to come back in later with the excavator, do a little bit of fine digging through there. Still ended up hitting the pipe, but it is what it is. So now we're back down over near the pond, the mud puddle, whatever you want to call it. And one thing, I don't think I mentioned this in the last video, is that there's actually a water line, an old water line that comes down through there that comes from a spring that's over on the neighbor's property, and we get water rights to it. But anyways, so that's an existing line, and right now we're trying to kind of figure out where that is and dig around that. And we ended up replacing part of that line and just putting in some new poly pipe for that. And it'll make it easier if we want to connect into it and make it longer or something later on and adjust where the pond's at. So that'll make that a bit easier, but just doing a little bit of fine digging around that, trying to figure out where that is so we don't rip it up. So this line here, this is running over to just a single frost-free hydrant that's going to be over in kind of what I call the middle woods. And now again, we're back doing a little bit more digging here around where the spring line is coming down through here. All right, and this is just more cleaning out the trench through here and making sure there's no rocks in the bottom. Now, we did end up sleeving all of this line through here just because there was so much rock in the fill that was going to go back in the trench. So this wasn't really necessary, but still, it's not a bad idea to do anyways. Now this pipe right here is something that we use if you have a crossing, like going across the main kind of road path in the farm. And as you can see here, this is kind of the main access to the back of the farm. So we put this larger, I think it was like a 4-inch, 3-inch, 4-inch PVC, hard PVC pipe over that. And that just helps protect the water line from getting crushed after it gets driven over, many times over, 20 years. And here you can see some of the sleeving that we put over the pipe. And like I said, that just helps protect the pipe from any sharp rocks that may be on top of it and keep those from wearing through. Now here we are, we're digging out the new line for the spring line that comes down over into the mud puddle, the little pond there. And we're just getting that dug out, and then we'll put in our new, it's just a 3/4 inch line that's gonna go in there. And it's actually gonna run down the trench that our main water line is in as well, and just kind of keep those together. That'll make it easier in the future. If we're putting in fence or whatever, we'll know that for the most part, that line is going to be over in that same general area, and we don't have to worry about hitting it. If you look there kind of at the end of the trench, you can see just a little bit of that metal pipe sticking up where we kind of dug through it coming down through there. So now coming down through here, I'm actually pulling like a 100-foot section of the sleeving. We started at the end of the pipe and just kind of fed it on through there, and then I'll just pull it down over the pipe to where we need it. And now if you aren't able to do that, what you can do is you can actually split the sleeving, split this drain pipe, and then kind of feed it over, over kind of through the split in it that you put in there. It's kind of a pain. Well, it's kind of a pain either way, to be perfectly honest, but you got some different options with the way that you put it on. But generally, it's less of a pain if you can feed it on through the end. Now, what I'm loading in here, this is the very final roll of the 1 1/4 inch pipe that we're doing. And last one to go in, gonna connect the line in from kind of above the pond, and then it'll come into a T that will join where the existing line comes down from the cistern. The other line goes over to the hydrant in the middle woods, and it'll bring all those together, and that'll be the very final connection on this main line coming up through here. Then we also needed a little bit more sleeving to go over that. Again, it was kind of rocky, and it was sharp rocky as well, so I had to grab a couple more rolls of that. Then we can get this thing wrapped up. So this is putting sleeving on from the other side here, just kind of feeding it down over the end. Now we're bringing down the end of that final roll of pipe there, getting the connector in there, getting that in place, getting the pipe clamps on it, getting the other end hooked on, and then now we can just drive right on up through there, roll it out, and we'll be wrapped up with that. So here we're just kind of rolling that pipe down over into the trench. Then with that done, I can just come right through again with the tractor, shove that dirt over in there, and then that part of it's done. I didn't show getting all of that put in there, but right here at the end, I've got a picture of the last connection that we did, and I was very happy to see that get finished up. Well, as I'm sure you were able to tell, we kind of lost light while we were filming this part of it here, but that wraps up laying the pipe for the water line. Now, we will have little short sections that we're going to be adding in that will go to the valve assemblies, that will go to the frost-free hydrants and the cattle waters and stuff like that. So, there might be another 100 feet that goes in as we put that stuff in, but this is the main stuff done. It's the main trenching done. And then in the next video, we are going to start going over putting in the pads, but that's a whole thing onto its own, and that's why we're gonna put that in the next video. So hopefully you guys found this somewhat interesting. The trenching part took somewheres around about a month to get done. So what you just watched was about 4 or 5 weeks worth of work, but it was a lot of hours in there. And my dad also put in many hours on the excavator. I just wasn't able to get cameras around and show everything, and besides it would have been pretty boring to watch all those thousands of feet get done. So you just saw some of the highlights with what went on during the past 5 weeks. So like I said, next video is going to be getting the pads in. I don't know if that's going to be next week or whether it's going to take a couple weeks before that one comes out. It's a little bit hectic right now trying to figure out time to get this part of things done as well as actually get the real work done as well. So it may be a couple weeks before that comes out, but we'll see. As always, I appreciate you guys watching, and I will see you next time.